And again, Miss Bridget, you know, welcoming the Byte Wellness fam to this conversation. Miss Bridget, I'm really glad that you shared what you did with us about your exercise wins and exactly what it took for you to overcome those barriers, because that's very relevant to today's conversation. So, um, we are talking about overcoming wellness barriers. And as usual, we addressed our discussion questions for the week. These were texted to you guys on Sunday, as are all of our discussion questions. And so the conversation that we're having is really around identifying the barriers that make it hard for us to practice our wellness habit. And then from there, figuring out how to actually overcome those. And again, it's not about working hard as much as it is about working smart, uh, using strategy, and then being diligent or disciplined in practicing that strategy. So, when we talk about building wellness habits, you guys have heard about this acronym. So, we've used this before: BATS, BATS, thinking about minimizing your barriers, thinking about leveraging your assets, thinking about building automatic triggers to start to make your wellness practices as automatic as brushing your teeth, so you don't give yourself a chance to decide not to do them. And then scheduling protected time to practice those wellness habits. So think of the wellness strategy or the habit strategy you apply to these practices that allow you to build habits. Think of that strategy as like your next time at bat, your next opportunity to swing and succeed in reaching your goals. So, in thinking about barriers, because we actually talked about scheduling protected time last week, and now we're focused on barriers, as I said, think about barriers in broad strokes. It's really too overwhelming to list every little thing that we think makes it challenging to, say, exercise regularly or eat more veggies or get to sleep on time. But if you can categorize your barriers in one of these four categories, so we use the STEM or the STEM method to make sense of just the groups of barriers that affect us. And the first letter of STEM is S. So the first thing that can keep us from practicing these wellness behaviors diligently enough to turn them into habits is if we don't have enough stuff. If we are lacking any of these STEM characteristics, the first one being stuff, it makes it difficult to achieve our goals. So if you don't have access to the equipment that you need or the space that you need to practice your wellness goal, then you're less likely to do it. If you don't have enough time, T being the second letter in our STEM acronym, if you don't have enough time to practice your wellness goal, then you're less likely to do it. And Miss Bridget shared with us earlier that, you know, time was actually her biggest challenge in practicing daily exercise and building a daily exercise habit. And so she shared with us a couple ways that she was able to overcome this time barrier. And we'll talk about that in a second. So, next in STEM is enjoyment, E for enjoyment. So, if you don't enjoy the skill that you're supposed to be practicing, you're less likely to do it. And so you're less likely to build a habit because you're having to use sheer willpower to practice every day, to do a thing that you just don't want to do. And that's a barrier that, believe it or not, we can overcome pretty easily. The last barrier that trips a lot of us up without us even realizing it is mastery. So not having the know-how, right? Not knowing how to practice certain skills. Maybe you don't know how to do some of the exercises you've decided you're going to do every day, and so they just don't get done. not knowing how to cook certain foods. So think about which of your wellness barriers uh, fits into each of these four categories. And we're going to address exactly how you can troubleshoot each of these categories. So you guys, we talk about really the big four behaviors. So eating, movement, sleep, and stress management, EMS. These are the life-saving, life-changing behaviors that can lower our risk of developing these type 2, these lifestyle related chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, like high blood pressure, that lead to heart attack and stroke, that can lead to chronic kidney disease, which can lead to dialysis, that can lead to blindness, that can lead to early death and unnecessary suffering, right? It turns out that these behaviors can have a huge impact on preventing those diseases. And they also have a huge impact on managing those diseases, even once we're diagnosed with them. So, how exactly can stuff? I'm going to go through the exercise here. And Miss Bridget, just because you gave us the example of exercise, I'll ask you to participate in this. How can not having enough stuff limit your ability to, say, build a daily exercise habit? Or a better question is, has that ever been a problem for you?
So the stuff was equipment, access, right?
Yeah, so it's equipment, it's tools, it's here's a question. So you've got a Peloton, right? Not everybody has a Peloton, not everybody has workout equipment at home. And so a lot of us feel like if you don't have the equipment, then you can't really work out. But of course, we know that there are other ways to work out without weights, without additional equipment. If you got a floor that you can lie down on, you can work out. If you got a couch you can sit on or chair, you can work out. But so, right, that's the question for you. Say, before you got the Peloton, which has made such a difference in your daily exercise habit, did you feel that not having enough equipment was limiting your ability to exercise?
Well, I guess I'm one of the few privileged people who's always had gym and exercise equipment in their home. But what I can say is, I have always enjoyed jogging outside. So you don't need a lot of equipment for that other than running shoes. I have always performed a lot of calisthenics, and it was just a matter of knowing what to do and doing some of those exercises. And something that I take with me when I go on trips or out of town, I try to find hotels that have workout rooms. In fact, that's actually how I choose a hotel a lot of times. But I have resistance bands that I just roll up and put in my luggage. I also have some ankle weights. I remember being dinged at airport security, and they wanted to know what was in the X-ray. They wanted to know what was this, because these ankle weights had half-pound lead plates in them, and you can go up to 4 pounds or 8 pounds or something. Anyway, I never even realized the lead plates would show up, and they wanted to know if they were like some type of crazy equipment. But anyway, right. So I've always taken that into account, that if I wanted to work out and I knew I would not have access to any workout equipment, ankle weights work wonders. You can do every leg exercise with ankle weights. Those ankle weights go on your wrists. And like I said, I buy the ankle weights that go up to 8 pounds, and they can be anywhere from half a pound to 8 pounds. Just depends on if you take the little lead rectangles out, So I think it's 4 pounds each, 8 pounds total, 4 pounds each ankle weight. So you can double up and use 8 pounds is what I'm saying, but it's each ankle weight is 4 pounds. So I have that is a barrier. So that's stuff to be concerned with. But I'm telling you, I've learned one of the most important things is your body weight. Can you stand on your toes 10 times? Can you do push-ups or sit-ups? You don't need equipment for that. You just need a floor, and you just need to know what to do and to do it. So I've always thought that stuff was never going to be a barrier for me because I could always do something.
That's such a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. You explained a bunch of different ways to troubleshoot equipment limitations, right? This stuff being a barrier to movement. And the final conclusion was, look, if you don't have anything at all, if you don't have ankle weights, if you don't have a bike, if you don't have exercise bands, like, don't let not having those things keep you from moving right this moment. Don't tell yourself you have to Amazon them, you have to go out to Target and buy them. You can move right now in ways that are meaningful just using your own body weight, doing squats, doing crunches, doing other core exercises, jumping jacks, marching in place. If you do high knees, if you do any activity enough times, your muscles will get very tired. You will get a good workout. And depending on how fit you are, you may need to look at doing 100 reps or hundreds of reps, perhaps, before you get a really good workout. But it's always possible. So, thank you for helping me show folks how we can troubleshoot movement um, when it comes to stuff or equipment being a barrier. So I'm just going to run through the examples of these other three wellness exercises because they're really important too. So it's really common for folks to think that if they don't have exactly the right type of food, that they can't begin to shift their diet or they can't begin to eat healthily. So we don't have to focus on eating only organic or non-GMO in order to get the benefit of eating more vegetables and fruits. We can even get a benefit of vegetables and fruits if we're eating frozen ones. There's the potential, even in eating more canned veggies, if you're able to get very low sodium, there's a potential of getting some nutritional benefit from those. Ideally, frozen veggies are preferable to canned because they don't come with added sugar, or rather, they don't come with added salt, and generally haven't been um, flash boiled as many canned products are. And so they've conserved the majority of their nutrients through the freezing process. So if you can't get to fresh fruits and veggies, that doesn't have to stop you from eating more fruits and veggies and getting that benefit. Go frozen. We talk about preparing food. So access to the food isn't the only issue, right? But having access to the tools to prepare food, whether it's a stovetop, an oven, an air fryer, special skillets, you'd be surprised what you can do with just a burner and an old skillet or a even an air fryer, which folks are making great use of in roasting vegetables these days. So stuff is one of those limitations. I hope you're getting you're catching on to the pattern. Stuff or equipment is one of those barriers that can seem huge. It can seem very limiting, but in fact, if you're able to think a bit creatively, you can readjust your wellness practices to what exactly you have access to, use the equipment that you have. We've all got something, and just make the most of that for now. Not having enough stuff to practice exactly the type of wellness skill that you want to practice or that you see on television or social media is not, it doesn't have to be the reason why we don't practice any form of wellness or don't make any sort of progress in that category. We talk about sleep. The question is, do I have the right tea? Do I have the right sleeping mist? Do I have all the special equipment that's gonna like get me to a sound sleep? But the reality is that using basic sleep hygiene practices, we can actually overcome some of the perceived equipment limitations. So going to sleep at the right time every day, limiting our exposure to these LED backlit devices. So limiting phone and TV and computer and tablet before bed for an hour or two to make sure that our bodies have an opportunity to wind down, to allow that melatonin to build back up to get us to sleep. That can be incredibly helpful. Listening to relaxing meditative playlists can be helpful in getting to sleep, and you can often find those even on YouTube for free. Just make sure that you hit that snooze button on your device so they actually turn off within 20 minutes or so they don't wake you up. They're not on repeat and waking you up in the middle of the night once you've actually gotten to sleep. And then, for stress management, similar instance applies. We are told that we need all sorts of equipment to appropriately de-stress. But what we really need is for our brain to be present, for our body to be relaxed. And we can do that depending on the techniques you have at your disposal, which is just a matter of learning. We can do that from just about anywhere. So, Miss Bridget, how does all that sound to you? Any obvious examples that you have where access to stuff has been a barrier for you, either for eating, sleep, stress management? Or any examples from your friends, even how friends have overcome these things?
Yeah, I love how Dr. Michelle would talk about her eating barriers, and she'd talk about how she'd either visit different countries or go to certain restaurants. And I should say she'd go on trips and go to certain restaurants, and she would always ask what's on the menu.
Yeah.
Sometimes she'd take her own food along. She gave us so many different anecdotes about how she made sure that she could be in control of the stuff or acquire the stuff that worked for her, and that she wasn't willing to settle. So I always think of her examples and so many things that she's mentioned before. And so the idea is, when you recognize that there could be barriers, you've already amassed the tools to try to overcome them, from eating to movement to sleep. And sleep is a matter of fall on the floor and go to sleep, or lie on the couch and fall asleep. I mean, I don't know what you need other than to turn the television off and turn your brain off. And then with stress management, that's a lot harder, because stress management, I think, is more psychological, and those are not tangible tools that you would acquire, or stuff that you would acquire to help you with stress management, unless you do what I do, and I use exercise for my stress management.
Well, look,
and that's why I'm religiously working out. It's like this, I'm relieving stress. So but other ways of stress management, other ways of stress management, like I said, that's not tangible, but and it's so individualized. You have to figure out what works for you, and that could just be meditation, listening to your music, humming to yourself. I think once before we talked about people playing their musical instruments, and what you don't even have to have stuff for stress management, because you can just go close your eyes and meditate.
That first of all, I'm glad that you brought up Dr. Michelle. I'm going to get back to her and her amazing uh, knack for troubleshooting these barriers in a second. But as for stress management, you are totally right. All you really need is your body and your brain to relieve stress and maybe to be a little bit creative about um, the stress management styles or practices that work for you. But, and you guys know what I'm talking about, there is a whole wellness and stress management industry that would have us believe that if we don't have the right crystals, you cannot de stress. Or if you do not have the right, um, I don't know what was last, what would have been featured on Goop last, for example. If you don't have the right, oil diffuser, if you don't have special lavender drops to put on your wrists, then there's no way you can de-stress. And the reality is that like managing stress is very hard, as you mentioned, really complex psychological process with skills that as a greater society of Americans just aren't teaching ourselves and aren't great at seeking out from professionals. So it makes sense that a lot of people would feel stressed enough that they need to look outside of themselves to things to help manage that stress. And look, I'm not going to knock it if it works for you, but what I don't want is for someone to be so taken in by the sort of stress management industrial complex that they feel that they need more than just themselves and perhaps a psychological professional in order to begin the process of uh, managing stress. And obviously, when I talk about skills, I'm talking about comfort with, say, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, practicing self CBT potentially, practicing it with a trained psychological professional. Um, I'm thinking about diaphragmatic breathing, uh, deep breathing practices that in trials have actually been shown to slow down the heart rate, to um, trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, to send our body signals that we're safe and that we can relax. Like these are some of the activities that you can actually just do on your own if you have a few moments. But I think it is worth pointing out that access to healthcare professionals isn't equitably distributed. Black folks are less likely to have access to physicians of all sort and psychological professionals. Um, we've seen the movement to emphasize therapy for Black men, Black women, and non binary folks. And, that exists for a reason that we haven't historically had great access to these services. Uh, and so I don't want to overlook the significance of having access to a healthcare professional or a psychological professional rather, as one of those pieces of equipment or one of those tools that we need to manage our stress. That is one of those things that can still be troubleshot, um, but requires us stepping outside of ourselves to do it. So things like um, therapyforblackgirls.com. I think blackladytherapist.org may be another website where you can find specifically Black women therapists, social workers, psychologists, and psychiatrists um, to support us in a way that centers our experience. So thank you for adding that. And then before we leave this category, yes, we have to big up Dr. Michelle because she is the queen of preparing herself for healthy eating by thinking about barriers. She anticipates before she goes to restaurants. She's told us all this on these virtual forums. She's told us that she looks at the menu before she goes to a restaurant to make sure that she can identify some healthy and usually vegetarian or vegan option. And then I remember she told us that she was on vacation, uh, having food prepared, and actually just had the chef make a completely new vegetarian meal for her because there weren't any vegetarian options on the list, on the menu. And that was absolutely amazing because that's an example of how when you're out in the world and you don't have perfect control, we might feel like we don't have a ton of control over the food that's presented to us, but we always have options. You can always try to ask for something different. You can always kind of mix and match different pieces from the menu, from the buffet, etc. Flexibility and creativity are the name of the game in overcoming wellness barriers. I'm going to skip over time, which is our second wellness barrier in our STEM framework, because we focused all on time last week. Uh, do I want to skip time? Miss Bridget, you did such a great job of walking us through uh, how you overcame time as a barrier to daily exercise. So I'll make this one comment for the folks who couldn't join us on the call. So I'll recount your story. Miss Bridget went from a more sedentary lifestyle than she had ever really had before to over the course of a year, maybe year and a half, finding a consistent daily exercise practice. And she says that one of the barriers to exercising every day was finding time to do it. And that actually the way that she overcame that time was by, or that overcame the time barrier rather, is that she used one of the 3 B's. Guys, last week we talked about the 3 B's that you want to use to overcome time when it's a wellness barrier. The first B is you block off time. You got to schedule it. If it's a priority, if it matters to you, schedule it like you schedule everything else in your day so it happens. And then you can bundle your time or break it up. And you can check out last week's lecture to understand more what breaking up and bundling your time looks like. But essentially, Miss Bridget, you told us that you started blocking off time to exercise, and you used a trigger, an alarm to do that. So the alarm would go off and you'd exercise. And you realized that, look, sometimes I'm busy. I'm finishing up work at whatever time the alarm goes off. And maybe I'm not ready to work out just then, but I'm going to give myself one more chance. You said I'll reset that alarm for an hour out or 45 minutes out. And the next time it goes off, that's it. I got to drop everything I'm doing and go work out. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you utilize that first one of the 3 B's to overcome your time barrier when it came to exercise. And guys, that is the first thing that that trips us up. That's the first thing that we overlook when we have wellness goals that we just cannot seem to reach, practices that we just can't build consistency in. Usually, the first issue is that we are not actually blocking off time to do this thing every day or multiple times a day or however often we've decided that we need to do it. So those 3 B's: block, bundle, and break your time. Breaking up the time. That's how we overcome time as a barrier to wellness practices. Now, our third barrier is enjoyment. So, not enjoying our wellness practice is a surefire way to make sure that you do not build a habit in it, no matter how hard you work, is a surefire way to be disappointed because you will have put in a lot of work and still somehow cannot maintain this practice long enough to build a habit. So, Miss Bridget, we didn't highlight this when you first told your story, but I think you mentioned something that triggered this idea of enjoyment. Um, you talked about how you use the Peloton app for cross training purposes. So doing what, aerobics and body weight activity that doesn't include the bike. And the way you described it, you actually sounded really excited about switching up the different activities. So I wonder if you don't enjoy quite a bit having access to these different activities, switching up the options. Um, and if that isn't something that has helped you to build this wellness habit,
It
what do
it
you think?
abso- it absolutely is, and that's what I discovered, and that's why I said, I will join. They're called programs, so I will
Hmm.
join a certain number of programs, and right now I'm up to three. Um, I find it exciting because it's not the same thing. It's not mundane. You switch it up. You may do two things in one day. Some days, as my program is winding down, I do three things in one day. So that may be an hour and a half of activity. I actually enjoy that. That's wonderful. But it's exciting because you have an instructor, you have someone who's telling you what you're going to do and that you can do it. And it's wonderful to kind of see the benefits as you get to week 5 of the program or week 4 of the program. One program,
Mm.
I restarted it. It's the core program. You don't need any equipment. You just need your body on the floor. And I'm going to the 5 week program again because I realized in 5 weeks my core was stronger. I said, well, let me do this again because I need to be even stronger. Um, so I'm doing three. I'm so excited. It is exciting, and I find that when I'm excited about it, I that's my motivation level. I am more ready. I more readily put down everything to go take care of it all. And it's gratifying. I just absolutely love it. But that's how I loved jogging and running before I became a couch potato. I
Ah,
loved putting on my workout. I had workout tracks, my workout reel. I loved going outside to run or the treadmill or wherever. And it was just so wonderful. And it was a way to get away. And I find that this is my peace. This is my stress. This is my de stress time. So
there you
I'm linking it
go.
to a lot of things. And I know that's probably what's motivating me because I've actually linked the need to, because I know I need to do it. And I know I want to do it, but to get me over the hump, I've linked it to several other positive things that
Hmm.
are just ultimate encouragement for me. So one, I enjoy it. Two, the benefits are I'll be stronger and then I can run faster outside for a race. And three, I'm fitting my clothes a little better. So hey, it's win-win.
There you go. So your initial goal was weight loss, and if you're fitting your clothes better, then it sounds like it's worked. You're
You know
making
what?
progress on that front.
And as Dr. Michelle said, don't worry so much about that. Just put the hard work in, and the weight will fall. And so I stopped worrying about that and weighing myself. And then the other day, I weighed myself, and I was 4 pounds even lighter than even before. So
Wow.
here we are. It's
And I
working.
love that without the stress of
Hmm.
watching the scale, just
Not
doing
even
the
look.
work, and
Yep.
you know how it'll turn out. So yeah, I think that enjoyment, as you said, ends up being such an important part of building wellness habits because it triggers that reward pathway in our brains. The the surge of dopamine that reminds us, um, or rather, that sets up pathways from feeling to behavior that ends up becoming a cycle, right? So we are more likely to learn behaviors that we actually really enjoy, that give us a sense of reward. That would be the joy part of it, or the excitement. And then, when it comes time to do that behavior again, we're actually more willing to practice it. So not only are we neurologically more likely to learn, but we're also just more likely to put in the work, the practice, because it all feels so good. And so, if there is a change we're trying to make in our eating, or our exercise, or our sleep, or our stress management, and we're just dragging our feet, it's worth asking yourself the question, well, is enjoyment a barrier? Like, is this exercise something that I just don't like? And if that's the case, can I think of a different type of exercise that I kind of really like doing? Like, maybe I just like dancing. Well, that could be your workout. If your goal is to just move more, um, you try dancing workouts. If you're social and you want to exercise with other people, consider exercise classes, consider participating in workout apps that allow this social capability. If we're talking about eating more nutritionally rich foods, um, then, eating more veggies, for example, and you're just having a really hard time, do you like the veggies you're eating? Maybe you don't like the taste. If you don't like the taste, then there's no way you're going to eat it on a regular basis. It's just not going to happen, or it's really unlikely to happen. So, um, find a version of a vegetable, figure out different ways to prepare it, figure out different types of foods that you actually enjoy. Try putting spinach in smoothies if you like smoothies, but you don't like salads, for example. Be creative again with the way that we practice these skills, and even with the skills that we practice, to try to overcome that enjoyment barrier by expanding our level of enjoyment. And so, guys, we're coming to the end. I want to make sure that we cover this very last wellness barrier. The M in STEM stands for mastery. And that just means that you have developed a certain level of expertise in the wellness skill. You can do it, and you can do it pretty comfortably. Um, Mastery ends up being a really big deal, because we'll hear about an exercise or a meal, or even a stress management, a meditation technique. Never tried anything like this before. We decide to try it. We decide, shoot, 2022, new year, new you. I'm going to do this every day. But you've never done it before. And there's a steep learning curve. And the first few times you try it, you get really discouraged. And before you know it, you're not trying it anymore. And so that New Year's resolution, or that new goal, goes in the L category, right? It feels like a loss because I tried, but it didn't work. When the reality is, maybe I could have tried to build a habit in a skill that I already have. And so, Miss Bridget, when she was talking about movement earlier, she actually said um, that mastery was really important. You didn't use those words specifically, but you said, look, I know how to do certain body work exercises. I know how to do strength training at home with ankle weights. I've done this for a while now. And so it's no big deal for me to get down and do these exercises. But if you're trying something completely new, then you either have to give yourself the grace of making a new goal, which is just mastering that activity. And then after you've mastered it, after you're pretty comfortable executing all the pieces of it, you can move on and set a goal of practicing that activity on a regular basis, right? Building consistency, but don't expect to go from no knowledge and no experience in a skill to suddenly doing that skill on a consistent basis. It takes time. Give yourself that grace. Allow your goal setting to be flexible. Where that comes in handy is especially in eating, right? In shifting our diets, because we've got exposure to all these new foods and all these new flavors and even preparation methods. So if you don't know how to cook, some people have not spent a ton of time cooking and yet want to shift to eating more vegetables. And if you search plant-based recipes, you're going to find a lot of recipes that require you to cook on the stove top, perhaps, or using an air fryer, or in the oven. And so that can be incredibly daunting if you've never done it. What might work is, as we said before, giving yourself the grace of either backing off that activity and finding ways to eat more vegetables without having to cook them, i.e., using them in a smoothie, adding them to a salad, or decide that you're just going to commit this time to learning how to cook using some basic techniques, and you're not going to give yourself a really hard time about the amount of veggies that you're eating right now, because really what you're focusing on, the big project you're focusing on, is building up this mastery of cooking, right? And cooking veggies specifically in a way that's tasty to you. Once you're able to do that, then you can move on to preparing veggies on a regular basis, eating them for your 5+ servings a day. Same goes for sleep and stress management, guys. So for folks who are not practicing sleep hygiene principles, who have not made shifts like avoiding LED lights or blue lights before bed, uh, folks who have not created a standard schedule to practice before bed, who are not able to go to bed at at the same time every night. Uh, all of these, uh, all of these habits that we call sleep hygiene that can actually influence your ability to get adequate quantity and quality of sleep. If you haven't mastered those skills, then maybe you're being too hard on yourself if you expect to snap your fingers and get a great night's sleep tonight, right? You kind of have to practice doing each one of those skills, building up each of those as its own habit, building mastery in those, and then put them all together for this greater habit. So we've reviewed the STEM approach to overcoming wellness barriers, accounting for your lack of stuff or lack of time or lack of enjoyment or lack of mastery. And of course, as we keep saying, flexibility and creativity and grace are the name of the game in overcoming wellness barriers. Allow yourself to reset your goals as you understand which barriers exist and how malleable they are for you. Uh, give yourself the grace of recognizing that maybe you weren't able to reach certain goals because they were not the right goals for you. Maybe you were reaching too far at that moment. It doesn't mean you can't get there, but you got to take baby steps. As usual, you guys can find me online at Dr. Woos on our text thread. Um, Reach out to us at Byte Wellness at any of our social media platforms. And I'll talk to you next week. Happy, healthy living.
Yay. Thank you. Bye.